is George Washington, but it's the general to you. Or you could call me President 1, not 3 or 2. And you probably heard a lot of silly stories about me, but let me lay it down how raw I really used to be. I got a hemp operation back at the plantation, selling the stickiest shit around the new nation. So come run and find me if you wanna get high, cause honestly I got the bombest, I cannot tell a lie. Pick it dry, of course I'm gonna try. Bag it up and brick it and then just let them buy it. And if the Brits wanna come and take a piece of the cut, I'll raise a whole fucking army, let them see what's what. The king's like, yo, I gotta get paid. I'm like, tough titty, cause y'all's a whole ocean away. And you can try to send some ships to come and make me pay up, but that's an awful long way just to suck these nuts. You get my fucking message, son?
Howdy, folks. Your host, Double J, back here, coming at you live from my studio / RV dining room, located directly outside the city of Little Port-au-Prince, Ohio, formerly known as Springfield, Ohio. Hide your cats, hide your dogs. They're eating your pets. Anyhow, folks, I will be your pilot and navigator for this shenanigan-infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude. Joining me here tonight is my co-host, Nick of the Occult Rejects. Appreciate you joining me here, bud. How you doing?
Good. What up? What up? Thank you very much for having me on again, man. It's always a pleasure. Always fun.
For sure, man. I appreciate you joining me. Typically, we have Headless Giant on with us for these Society Cincinnati discussions. This is kind of an addendum to our previous discussions on the matter, and he may be joining us here tonight, and he may not be. I don't know. Inconclusive. He's currently missing in action. We might need to send out a search party for old Headless.
Yeah, we're gonna have to put out a search party for him.
Right.
I think he's probably sleeping. That's my guess.
Nice. No worries. He'll have to catch up on this one later then.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
we've previously discussed the Society of Cincinnati, the secret society that started America. The founding fathers of which, many of which comprised membership in the society. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And some of them were obviously more friendly. The ones that weren't members, some of them were more friendly than others. For example, John Adams, not a fan, wasn't a fan of the society. He was not a member. He did not serve in the wars of 1776. Ben Franklin also did not serve in the wars of 1776. Seemingly big fan of the society, that Franklin. Big fan of a lot of things. He was a big man. But, yeah. So, and which is weird because, it gets into the interesting kind of dynamics around the start of America relative to the society, especially. You have folks like Franklin, who's a founding father, who, again, very pro-society. However, his son was the British colonel in charge of the forces in New Jersey. So he was a British loyalist. So, you get some interesting dynamics like that, just internally to the families that are involved. But those interesting dynamics, I think, continue on past the start of America onto this day. And that's kind of what we covered, I think, in the, our discussions with the initial onset, the 1776 edition, and then the 1812 edition of the society discussions me and Headless previously discussed there.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think those interesting dynamics, they don't go away, you know what I mean? Like the day Aaron Burr, the New York chapter member of the society, murdered Alexander Hamilton, fellow New York chapter member, but also President General. So Washington was the society was started. I'm just going to give a quick overview here before we get into some new stuff here, Nick. If this is which I think is interesting because this speaks to, I was telling you offline here before we started tonight's conversation, is again, I'm not going to take credit for it, but there is a shifting narrative around the Society of Cincinnati. Since I started talking about it, again, I'm not taking ownership of it. However, if my theories are correct about the origin story of Abner Vance, you know what I mean, being the son of George and Martha Washington, well, the secret society in which George Washington started, I suppose they're probably going to pay attention to what George Washington's descendant is narrating about their history, if you know what I mean. So take it for what you will. The narrative has shifted at times, and since I have just started discussing this specifically relative to the Civil War, right? So there's a narrative that that's one narrative, but the first narrative I think is interesting. And the last two times I've been through the Society of Cincinnati headquarters, in Washington D.C. their tour, they like to claim that on the tour that the society started in September of 1783 after the Treaty of Paris, right, which is the official end of the official end of the Revolutionary War, right? And here on their website, the societyofcincinnati.org, right? The Society of Cincinnati was founded by officers at the Continental Army encampment at Newburgh, New York. It's the cabin of Baron von Steuben, who was a general in the wars of 1776. One of the many European folk that popped over to help out. But he hosted the party essentially that this meeting occurred on at his cabin there on the shores of the Hudson River there on a mountainside, of course. But it says here that it was May of 1783, right? So, it's just one of the shifting narratives. You take the tour, they're going to say September of 1783. And I think the reason why they do it is because they don't want the whole military junta aspect attached to it, right? Because it says that they were all officers of the army. So in the tour, they're like, oh, they all resigned their commissions in the army before they did this, right? To try to separate the whole, military junta takeover situation, right?
Separate one from the next.
But, because I think it's really important for a couple of reasons. They try to spin that narrative, right? They try to make it sound like we're not still living underneath this right, wrong, or indifferent. Still not living underneath the power of the Society of Cincinnati, right? We live in a free and open society where, it's a democratic republic where anyone can be president, right? That's kind of, again, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's kind of the narrative that's been spun throughout our modern era of America, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you ever recall in school, like that was like, I remember in school, like growing up, like, oh, anyone could be you work hard enough, anyone could be the president.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that true? Right?
No.
If every president is related to one another, is that true? Right?
No, I could see work hard enough, you could maybe become a politician, but I don't think certain roles you ain't going to get. Unless of bloodlines or certain things you might
right. You're spot on. That's the that is absolutely what's going on. And with the exception of Martin Van Buren, every president is related to one another. It is about bloodlines. That's what the society's about, right? Hereditary bloodlines. And I think the first time I saw that was this maybe a junior high student somewhere in California did a project. She did a project on her genealogy and realized she was related to a number of presidents, and then realized all these presidents were connected. Here's a Wikipedia article on it, though. The source of all information on the interwebs. Ancestral background of all presidents of the United States. And it says it right there in the opening paragraph. This is all true right here about every president has ancestors from the British Isles, with the exception of Martin Van Buren and possibly Dwight Eisenhower. I don't know the Dwight Eisenhower one. However, Van Buren's wife was a member of the family, right? So she was a cousin to every U.S. president. Van Buren's an interesting character relative to the society, relative to a lot of the power struggles in America. He was part of the Tammany Hall faction out of New York City.
I don't even know. I never even.
Oh, it was this. Yeah, it was this big power center of corruption out of New York City in the early 1800s. It produced his underling was the fellow who won the presidency in 1876, Samuel Tilden. The Great Compromise of 1877. I'm circling this back to the Civil War here for you, Nick, in case you didn't see that one coming.
Yeah.
So Van Buren's underling was Samuel Tilden. Samuel Tilden, the guy who owned Untermeyer Park before Untermeyer. Samuel Tilden. He won the presidency in the election in 1876. It's called the Great Compromise of 1877 because he forewent to the presidency to, I believe, was it Garfield? Not the cat, but the James Garfield, I think.
Yeah.
I always forget who he beat, but the troops were ordered out of the South as a result of this. Rutherford B. Hayes. There we go. I knew it was somebody from Ohio. Rutherford B. Hayes became the president because Tilden resigned the position in an agreement to remove all of the federal troops from the South. So that's the end. That brings us back here to the Civil War discussion. We're here. Oh, I'm just catching up here on a couple of these chats from folks here.
I wish it allowed me to post things up, but it doesn't.
What is it?
I said I wish it would allow me to post things up on my end at least, but it doesn't.
It doesn't?
Nah, I can comment.
You're a victim. You're a victim to my attention span.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
I want to. That's a good thing to mention, just for people that know. Like, there's times I think people might think I'm ignoring them, but if I'm streaming and somebody else, if I'm just restreaming, I have no control over showing your comments. So I'm sorry.
And I'll
happens quite often for me, actually. So.
And I'll check in every 15 or 20 minutes and I'll remember. I'm like, oh shit, the comments.
Yeah.
This is a good question. Were the Mystic Order of the Veiled Prophets, the Mystic Wizards of the Enchanted Realm, related to this society? I wouldn't be surprised there's some cross membership of folks now. That wouldn't surprise me in the least.
Yeah.
For example, the guy who was the second president of the Theosophical Society, a fellow by the name of Abner Doubleday, the guy who allegedly invented baseball. He was a general in the Civil War. He likely was a member of the Society of Cincinnati. Speaking of the Tammany Hall crowd, he comes out of the Tammany Hall crowd as well. He was the president of the Theosophical Society after Blavatsky. So there's a lot of crossover between these characters and these enchanted wizards. Wouldn't shock me in the least, especially with the families we're dealing with. So while we're on that topic, we're talking about the Civil War relative to the society tonight. Well, actually, this is going to be the next tonight's show here, and next week and the following week, talking about Society of Cincinnati. So speaking of these elite families which compose the Society of Cincinnati and these kind of secret societies that in these, magical societies, wizard societies they join, there's a number of connections between the Society of Cincinnati and the OG membership of the Process Church of the Final Judgment, specifically out of the state of South Carolina. Two of the most prominent families out of the South Carolina chapter, one of their descendants out of both these families is also a descendant of the Astors. She's an Astor Drayton. She was the original, one of the founding members. She was the first wife of Timothy Wiley. I believe it was Timothy Wiley. Anyway, we're talking about some of those intersections next week with Dana from Rotting Jewels. So that's an interesting question about the crossover with these things, because again, there is certainly with these quote unquote elite families that comprise the Society of Cincinnati, they do have an interest in other magical activities, right? So it's the Process Church being one of them. But I think it's interesting relative to the Society of Cincinnati South Carolina chapter, because they obviously weigh heavily in the Civil War, right?
Yeah.
So two of the families out of there are, again, married into the Astor family. So the Astor family, this is another example of these families from the north and the south of the society, right? Intermarrying with one another. These specifically, I would actually assert, are likely within the anti-liberty what I call the anti-liberty faction. That is the Astors, as in like John Jacob Astor of Titanic fame and stuff. They're one of the society families out of New York. They intermarried with the Draytons. The Draytons would go back to a colonel, one of the colonels in the South Carolina chapter, and that family intermarried with the daughter of the Gadsdens, as in like the Gadsden flag. General Gadsden was a member of the Society of Cincinnati out of South Carolina as well. So there's a lot of South Carolina activities there, and again, that's kind of where the Civil War pops off, right? With the Battle of Charleston, right? So you have this South Carolina, situation going on, and and some of the power of the Society of Cincinnati does go back to South Carolina, right? So, and some of this narrative shifting, right, surrounding what may or may not have occurred around the society during the Civil War. So, as the story goes, the first president general was George Washington, and then that was from 1783 to 1799. July 4th, 1799, he resigned on a joint session. So they have these joint sessions of the society. So all the chapters show up in a specific location for a joint conference every so many years. And that's something that apparently did not occur during the Civil War, right? Again, there's been varying stories now that still exist, and there's been varying shift in those stories that have evolved into what the current positions are. Again, I'm open to interpretations about all these subjects, and I'm actually planning a trip to go to the Society of Cincinnati headquarters library to try to get to the bottom of some of the why there is such a mystery now suddenly around the alleged breakup of the society during the Civil War and the activities that existed during those 8 years, and then the resolution to some of their disputes. Because ultimately speaking, the Civil War, I don't know, what were you told there, Nick? Before I get back to the President Generals, let me disregard that last one. Let me get back to the President Generals. So the second one was Alexander Hamilton. He was murdered by Aaron Burr in what I allege is a dispute or civil war, right, amongst the society. That was, long before the Civil War by nearly 60 years, almost 58 years before the Civil War. But the third President General of the society was out of South Carolina. So you can see some of this power shifting from the New York chapter, Virginia and the New York, so the northern chapters to the southern chapters. You got, technically, I guess Virginia would be in the mix of the southern chapters, but Washington was more of a man of all the colonies, not just Virginia, right? So, but then it went to Alexander Hamilton and New York, and then again, then to the South. So I think there's something to be said about some of those power struggles that do go on, or how they even elect the current president general. Not sure, but it does interest me, the stories that have shifted around this stuff. So as far as the Civil War goes, Nick, what would you say as far like slavery? What are we talking here? What caused the Civil War? Was it
slavery?
Slavery?
Yeah.
That's what's sold, right? Like that's what everyone is told, right? Like slavery. It was the great, the Emancipation Proclamation from Abraham Lincoln, right?
Oh, you even had states seceding from the United States
to keep on slavery, right? Keep doing slavery, right?
Well, they were like, screw you, we don't agree with this. I guess if that's the story, I don't know.
That's the story, though, right? Like that's what everyone's saying, right? But I believe there was still, it wasn't common, like it wasn't the same kind of slave markets, I don't think, but I believe there were still slave markets in and around New York City post Civil War. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, well, that's an interesting statement by P. Thomas. Lincoln did not abolish slavery; he expanded slavery to all states and territories. Yeah, there were still slave markets going on post Civil War in the North. So it wasn't only, what I'm saying is it clearly wasn't only about slavery, right? Like that's what our modern narrative sold about, right? I mean, even the Lincoln assassination itself, we're told a certain thing today, right? It was definitely John Wilkes Booth, right? He's not really sold as a Civil War officer, but he was a Confederate Army officer, right? He was a Special Forces dude. Allegedly connections to things like the Knights of the Golden Circle, which was kind of their own Southern secret society of the power center of the Confederacy, right?
Never heard of that.
So, there's a lot more to be said about those things, because I know one thing I learned from being a Dave McGowan super fan was was everything that I knew about the Kennedy assassination was incorrect. I believe that was actually the title of his series on his website. Let's see. Why everything you think you know about the Lincoln assassination is wrong. They're on Dave McGowan's Center for an Informed America. Great series. I did learn that everything I knew about it was wrong. One of those things I learned was the immediately following the assassination, there was a conspiracy theory pamphlet written and published asking a series of questions and drawing, some doubt around a lot of the official narrative. So there, I think a lot of folks in the conspiracy culture like to claim like folks like Mark Lane and the JFK assassination was the first conspiracy theory book. I don't think so. In American history, I don't think so. There's one, again, there was a pamphlet, which was the common form of, written communications at the time. I don't think it was necessarily, novels were for fictional tales, right? This was not a fictional tale. So there's a pamphlet, and it's highlighted in that McGowan series that talks about, the questions surrounding the Abraham Lincoln assassination. And again, Abraham Lincoln, a member of the Society of Cincinnati. So one of the other shifting narratives around the subject of membership in the society is there's only been one hereditary member, allegedly, who was also the president, right? That's the story. I'm sorry, one I think was one. Let me look here. Again, these are shifting narratives, but I believe that is the current position. Again, it's a secret society, so in many respects, you're kind of open to whoever they claim as their membership, or whoever brags about it, right? Because there's a lot of that too. But trying to look up here the current. Here we go. The current position on the again the edits on this Wikipedia page are very interesting. And that's something I'll be covering in the future, is tracking some of this shifting narrative, at least on relative to their Wikipedia. That is something that can be tracked. But it says right here, every president who served in the eras of 1885 to disregard the last. The only presidents that were original members were George Washington, James Monroe, and then President Franklin Pierce was a hereditary member. So, and then Zachary Taylor was a honorary member before he became president. So,
they even when they get in, it's like, do you realize how long all right, the first time is for 38 years. And then the next one's for 20 years. It's like they get in and then still run with it for that long.
And no, I think that's this line right here. Every president who served in the eras of 1885 to 1923, 1933 to 1953, and 81 to 93 were honorary members of the society.
Yeah.
So they're saying Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Trump are not. So I don't know. And Biden, I suppose, right?
It's like, do you even have an option of not having them? Like, I mean, that's a huge chunk for them to constantly be having presidents, in my opinion.
Well, they're just saying that they're not inviting the president of the United States into the society during those gaps in those years.
Right? Is that what an honorary member means?
Yeah, that's what the honorary members are. They'll appoint a few honorary members, and relative to the Process Church or some other current Process Church folks that have membership going back to folks here in the society that we're going to go over next week, but they do have honorary members, one of which is being another one of the Process folks. But allegedly, all these presidents who are not hereditary members, and again, according to this, there's only a couple that are hereditary members, right? A couple that presidents that were original members, a couple presidents that were hereditary members. Now, again, I question a lot of these things, and especially relative to folks like Abraham Lincoln. So this is according to the Mormons. Sometimes this website, Geni.com, GENI, is not exactly accurate, but according to the Mormons, I compare it to whatever the Mormons are saying. And according to the Mormons, this is the accurate, genealogical record of Abraham Lincoln. This is his grandfather, Captain Abraham Lincoln the First, right? So it seems it's very likely, at least if Abraham Lincoln was not a hereditary member, one of his first cousins was, at bare minimum, right? So I would argue, since he's named after his grandfather, I would argue that he's the member, right? So that's what I'm saying about the shifting narrative of membership being hereditary members and whatnot. If they're saying the only hereditary member, right, the current position, the only hereditary member who was also became president of the United States was Franklin Pierce, right? And the reason I say that is because I don't think they like it when someone's a hereditary member and becomes president of the United States. For example, I would argue that William Henry Harrison was a member of the Society of Cincinnati before he became president of the United States, right? And I believe he was president for 31 days before he died. I believe they claim he got pneumonia at his inauguration. So he's buried on a mound on the western side of Cincinnati in a very Society of Cincinnati site. He's got the Society of Cincinnati Eagles, the eagle, on numerous spots at his gravesite. So again, was he only a member, honorary member, because he's a president? I mean, he served in the military. He's from one of the founding families of Virginia, the Harrison family. You know, one of his, I believe, was his grandfather, or was his father, I believe, was one of the signatories of the Constitution, right? That's what I'm saying. So, like, I don't know. I'm not willing to believe some of these positions on the society. Yeah. So, yeah, he was elected or took office March 4th. He died April 4th. So, yeah, 31 days later, he's dead. So, again, was he a member beforehand? Was he a hereditary member? It's possible. It's possible he was a member through his own membership, through his own service, because it seems like some of these folks serve, their membership is based upon the service in the War of 1812. So when I say the wars of 1776, I mean literally the start of the Revolutionary War through the War of 1812, and that's kind of what we discussed in our previous shows, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a long time they were causing problems.
America was kind of, I mean, they were kind of, we're sold, right? Like, that's kind of the Disney narrative, as I call it. Like, the Disney narrative is there was the wars of 1776, some folks didn't tell a lie. There's some trees not chopped down and whatnot, all these kind of fancy narrative tales. But really, America they never really stopped being at war, right? Thomas Jefferson immediately, again, you have all of this turmoil between, I would allege, Washington's murder on July 4th, 1799. It seems like he got poisoned, right? He got really ill in Philadelphia after he stepped down as the president general and gave that to Alexander Hamilton. He got very ill. Hamilton's dead a few years later. Jefferson's, fighting whatever internal battles going on with the attempt of Aaron Burr, right, to take over America during that, after Burr murdered Hamilton. Jefferson's also fighting the Muslims over in Africa, a lot of, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's the French Revolution going on. That's what I'm saying, there, which is part of the society, right? The French chapter, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot of things that just get glossed over right over this period, but really these things go through the War of 1812. And speaking of membership in the society, and somebody I've mentioned before, which is often not considered folks would not immediately consider the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Winston Churchill, to be a hereditary member of the society, right? So it's listed here on, again, Wikipedia, the source of all information on the interwebs. Right, but he's a member through his mother, right? So it's one of those instances where if there's not a son to pass it down to, what happens? Well, Winston Churchill's mother was an American. Her father didn't have any sons. So it seems that the membership passed down through Winston Churchill's mother to Winston Churchill. So if you look up here's Winston Churchill's Mormon accepted genealogy. It goes back to this fellow, Lieutenant Aaron Jerome, right, out of Connecticut. However, he did not serve in the wars of 1776 specifically, right? I mean, he didn't serve in the Revolutionary War. He did not serve prior to 1783, right? He served after that. He was serving in the 1790s, right? So because this dude's father, who served in the wars of 17, literally in the Revolutionary War, was not, he was the head enlisted dude for the state of Connecticut, right? He was not an officer. So then it goes back to did the enlisted membership get brought in at the Civil War, right? Because again, at one point in time, there was out of the original 13 colonies, the 13 original chapters in America, they did claim that the enlisted helped bring together society after the Civil War because the society had broken up, right? I just, it goes to question, if Winston Churchill was a member, did he get that membership through his grandfather or his great grandfather, right? One of the two. I'm sorry, great grandfather or second great grandfather, I believe here. But if it's second great grandfather, that means they brought in the enlisted. And if it's grandfather or great grandfather, that means that it's the guys who fought after 1783. Right? You see what I'm saying? These shifting narratives, right?
Yeah.
It's I'm not exactly surprised. I think again, this is folks who wield an uncontrollable amount of power behind the scenes in America today, not just in the office of the U.S. president, but in a lot of things through industry as well, and have a lot of impact. But the other question I have then about I'm just looking at a couple of these comments here. Again, I'm never good about staying on top of these.
It's tough to do both, honestly. I know it is.
The Burt and Lonnie divorced in 1994. Burt Reynolds and Lonnie Anderson. Is that what we're talking about? Burt is dead. How did we get on Burt? I don't even know how we got there.
Did we get to Burt Reynolds?
Yeah, I'm interested though. Well, I'm interested because the Andersons are a major. Is it because of WKRP in Cincinnati, the TV show? Because the Andersons are a major family in the Society of Cincinnati. In fact, that's the name of the headquarters in D.C. is the Anderson House. WKRP. Yeah, that was a very popular show, I guess, right?
Damn, you just brought it back, man. That's old.
Yeah, so I just think, well, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Nick, on the shifting narratives of the society, of their the membership? You know what I mean? The activities of it, right?
Well, yeah, it could either be like bylaws or things that, well, I don't even know if that's the right word that they use. I mean, there could have been maybe things that actually changed within the order that you've never heard publicly. I'm sure like that went on with the OTO. And it could be like the smallest little things that I may not even be able to think of right now. But
administratively,
yeah. Like at one point, like we were even told, like the certain roles in the Gnostic Mass all of a sudden had to change their outfit, or like, oh, we've been doing it wrong this whole time, whatever.
Sure.
So, but I mean, there's a couple of few things I think is a possibility. The internet sometimes, I don't know, just seems to not make sense on certain topics that might be of interest. Or something isn't right. Like
something ain't right. That's for damn sure. And when you're talking about literally the folks who run, who run the large part of the Western world, right? I mean, when we're looking at World War II, for example, we're looking at the Allied, the Allied powers. You got the Society of Cincinnati is running it, right? I mean, essentially, they're claiming. I think they're trying to claim it in some of this membership stuff here with these dates we were looking at before. If we look at these dates, are they trying to claim FDR was not a member? Because if that's the case, then they box FDR out. Now they got FDR as a member. So FDR is, you know what I mean? You got FDR and you got Winston Churchill, right? So you got the President of America and you got the British Prime Minister. They're both members of the Society of Cincinnati, right? So I think that's an interesting power dynamic that, again, gets overlooked. But when we're talking about the society, I mean, literally, these are the people that again, name a story, and even in conspiracy culture, this is, we can play 6 Degrees of Society of Cincinnati. Like, how many times has the story of Captain William Morgan been told, right? The story of William Morgan publishing the Freemasonic orders, getting kidnapped, and, I think they officially declared him dead, 6 years later or whatever, or something like that. 5 years later, sometime afterwards, his widowed wife would later become a plural wife of Joseph Smith, right? That never gets told in the William Morgan story, right?
I didn't know that. I didn't know it was a connection. Smith.
Oh yeah, you know what I'm talking about, William Morgan, the guy that printed the Freemasonic stuff.
Yeah. It was almost like is that like kind of almost like whistleblowing in a sense?
Sure. So that story gets told quite frequently without the other context, right? The fact that William Morgan A was a member of the Society of Cincinnati, right? Likely got murked by other members of the society, including I won't get into those narratives. But yeah, his widowed wife, who got him declared dead in court. I mean, I found those records. That did happen. She would later become Joseph Smith's first plural wife. She would travel with Smith to Kirtland, Ohio, I believe, and then she wouldn't go further. She didn't make the further west drive to Missouri. I believe she stayed behind in Kirtland. But yeah, so those contexts are left out of those things, right? Especially the fact that William Morgan was a member of the New York chapter of the society. But I mean, you can just scroll through this list of folks that they admit, in their Wikipedia as a member. I mean, you got the last king of France before the monarchy fell during the French Revolution, right? King Louis. He served in the French Revolution. He was an officer.
That is something I meant to say it before, and I think I was afraid it was just like off topic, and I just want to bring it up now. I feel like some of it even due to my own fault, because I have done these shows with you before. I mean, I did look a little bit, but I didn't go crazy. But I really feel like there has to be more with the French ones for some reason. I just have a feeling.
Right.
You don't hear much about what's going on with them, in France or.
Well, you may not. I think I do. I think they rented me an apartment over there.
That's right. But I'm telling you, you still need to show up and be like, well, it's my place.
Well, you got to bring a camera and we'll go over there and be like, hey, start filming. Like, hey, I'll just be like, hey, I live here. Look at the lease. Check it out.
Getting marked.
No, I think you're right. And that's something I've been trying to learn a lot more about is the French side. Because again, even looking at their list here, I mean, you got Pierre L'Enfant. Obviously, he's a common guy that's commonly known. He's the guy that designed Washington, D.C. But then, the French king is often overlooked, like we just covered. Then, of course, you got folks like DuPont, right? The DuPont family is almost synonymous with American conspiracy culture, right? And yet, no one talks about the DuPont family relative to the society, right? You know what I mean? Let's see here. Yeah, Senator Henry A. DuPont was a member, right? Here we go. Look at this guy. Look at this guy with this handlebar mustache. What were we saying?
I came across that last name for something recently, and I can't remember what it was for now. Damn.
Oh, the DuPonts? I mean, again, they're synonymous with, they're up there with the Rockefellers as far as, the conspiracy culture goes, right? So this guy specifically was the son of the founder of the E.I. DuPont company. So these are the folks. This is these are the folks that are really behind the Biden political era. They own most of the state of Delaware. For example, one of the members of the DuPont family molested their own child, got convicted of it, and then Joe Biden's son, who was the attorney general, not the crackhead, the other one, Beau Biden. He let the dude go. He said, "Oh, prison wouldn't be good for this guy." Well, who would be prison? Who would be good for prison? Scotch Guard changed the world. Yeah, I mean DuPont has a lot of money. One of Joe Biden's mansions was the DuPont mansion there in Virginia. It's a huge 10,000, I believe, square foot home. This is 10 years ago. Joe Biden used to get lost in that home. He's lost in his own home. But yeah, I mean DuPont's. That's what I'm saying. There's so many people that are not only just society families, but society members that don't get talked to. They get talked about all the time, even in conspiracy culture, but not in the context of the membership of the society, or they're a family of the society, one of the society families. For example, so I look at a lot of these things it's the modern day knighthood, right? So I look a lot of them is if you're one of the other branches of a family member, right? Like say you're a brother of a family member. Well, maybe that guy's going to be jealous of that and want to take out the brother. These are the things that used to go on with the medieval knighthoods, right? So it's kind of the same concept in modern era. There's a lot of internal struggles amongst some of these families, I believe, for membership in the society, right? I do honestly think that occurs. there are power struggles internally to bloodlines for who's going to be membership, right?
Oh, I could see that.
Right. So when you're dealing with the DuPont family, for example, right, shit can get pretty weird. They got a lot of money. You know what I mean? You got a couple siblings in a rivalry of who wants to fight it out for who wants that position, right? You see what I'm saying? Let's say the Rockefellers, for example, or the Astors, as I was mentioning before. Some of these very wealthy New York families in and around Westchester County, New York, the epicenter of a lot of evil, it seems.
Constant, right? It always goes back to New York.
Oh yeah, and especially that area, right? Westchester County, you know, home of the devil Hillary Clinton of all people. Charles Seymour, Skull and Bones founder. Yeah, see, I mean, we're talking about like there's not. That's what I'm saying. Like there's not really a conspiracy in America that you can talk about that doesn't connect to the Society of Cincinnati. And again, I mean, like literally, look at the power this organization is wielded, and no one really even talks about it. Before we get back to some of the Civil War stuff here, I want to go over some more of this membership stuff, since it does seem to be, again, a guessing game. Remember I said the Andersons? Here's one of those Andersons right here, Robert Anderson. And again, so almost without fail, every general in the Civil War was a member of the society, right? So these hereditary lines continued on through the Civil War. When I was saying Abner Doubleday, the guy that was the president of the Theosophical Society after Blavatsky's death, he was the second president. He was a general. You know, most of these Civil War generals are buried in mound cemeteries, either Arlington National Cemetery in D.C., the former home of Robert E. Lee.
Oh, look at his hand. You see what his hand's doing?
This fella?
Yeah.
Doing that Masonic thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, very well could be a Mason as well. But there's roughly 30 some odd Civil War generals buried in Spring Grove Cemetery on mounds in Cincinnati, Ohio. So, you know, the hidden hand.
Mm-hmm. Gary sees it.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of crossover, right? Again, I think Masons, Theosophical Society, other wizardry orders, you know, the Process Church. These are all things that membership does cross over. So back to the Civil War and Robert E. Lee there. Well, I mentioned the generals. Civil War general, right? Again, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but it kind of puts a different context when you look at the personal life of Robert E. Lee. So he marries what equates to be George Washington's granddaughter. Adopted granddaughter. So Martha Washington was married to Daniel Custis before George. So Martha Dandridge, Custis, and then Washington. So she had a number of kids. One of her kids from the Custis relationship had a child they named George Washington Custis. George and Martha would adopt this child and raise them as their son. George Washington Custis's daughter married Robert E. Lee. So it kind of puts a whole family feud perspective, doesn't it? In regards to and again, he's the son of a Revolutionary officer, Henry Lighthorse. Pardon me. Henry Lighthorse Harry Lee III. So was he a member of the society, right? So it seems that he's a member of the society, right? He's also essentially married into the Washington family, right? So he's like, I'm taking this bitch over. You know, I think he was basically declaring, you know, he wasn't the president of the Confederate States, but I think, you know, if you want to look for the power of the Confederacy, you're looking there further than this man right here. And I think it's because of his relationship, his membership in the society and his relationship to the Washington family. So that other cemetery I was mentioning that all the Civil War generals are buried at, besides Spring Grove in Cincinnati, Arlington National Cemetery, that used to be this dude's land. So part of the Civil War, the treaty signed was Mr. Lee here gave up his property, and it was mound property, and I think that's very valuable stuff to the Society of Cincinnati.
Mounds again.
I mean, it's the underlying plot with all these folks, you know what I mean? But these are not the details that anyone's taught about the Civil War. You know, the Robert E. Lee Washington family connection, the Robert E. Lee being a member of the Society of Cincinnati connection, right? Now, there's an argument to be made that Jefferson Davis was also a member, right? So he marries. I think I may have misspoke on this in past episodes, but now that we're on the topic, Jefferson Davis, much like I was saying before about Winston Churchill's heritage, going back to the war, you know, the post Treaty of Paris service in the U.S. Army, right? On to the wars of 1812. Jefferson Davis served as a captain in the wars of 1812, guarding mounds in Iowa, what's known as the Effigy National Park in Iowa today. That's what's known as today. But he marries Zachary Taylor's daughter. Zachary Taylor's daughter is named after General Knox, the guy who started the Society of Cincinnati. Zachary Taylor was one of the guys that was a member before he was president, right? So he was an important member. So I think Jefferson Davis was also an important member of the society, right? He had the military service, right? Very likely qualified, in my opinion. He's also the guy who started the Smithsonian. He was on the Senate committee. He was a U.S. Senator from Mississippi before the war. He was on the committee to start the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian's first project was to map and survey mounds. So Jefferson Davis, I think, is an important character as well. And again, none of these things get discussed relative to the Civil War.
Something with those mounds, man.
I mean, I don't know exactly what it is, but yeah, it's definitely something with those mounds for sure. And again, I think it's a dispute. So one of the missions of the Civil War, and I always get this mixed up, it's not Rogers Rangers. There was a Confederate, I believe, colonel or general, I believe. Stand by 1 second. I'll describe it as I'm looking for it. Confederate general who raided the North, and they just happened to raid Morgan's Raiders. There we go. Damn it, I couldn't think of it for a second. Confederate General John Hunt Morgan. I always want to call it Rogers Rangers, which was the unit out of New Hampshire during the Revolutionary War. So I know it's not it, but that's always what I think of. But yeah, so Morgan's Raiders is what it was. General John Hunt Morgan. So let me see if I can bring up a map of Morgan's Raiders here. They literally, I mean, they raided the North. They just happened to go to mound sites, right? They raided towns. Here we go. This is their trek here in this red line. So this is during the war. They crossed over into Union territory, and you can see right here, Harrison. They went right past William Henry Harrison's grave right here, according to this map. You can see they came up on this red line. So all like these towns they're going through in Indiana, for example, this one right here in Vernon, Indiana. They don't have it listed on here, but they also stopped at one called Madison, Indiana, as in James Madison. That's another mound city in Indiana. They raided the Freemasonic lodges. So we saw the guy before with the hidden hand, right? So Morgan's Raiders, according to their own records, there was a number of Masonic lodges that got raided along this route. Those Masonic lodges were in towns named like Madison, after again one of the members of the society. So it was a mound town. Whether or not the Freemasonic lodge there was built on a mound, that I don't know. What I do know is it was a mound town, and they did raid that one. There was another one they raided was definitely on a mound on this raid on the Freemasonic lodges. So I think what was going on, this is my opinion, based upon, my assumptions of what was going on here and the details that I've understood. They were raiding Masonic lodges that were built in and around mounds that had mound contents in them, right? So I think what they were really raiding was not like anything like gold or money wise necessarily, but they wanted the treasures, if you will, from these mounds. Because they went when they're going through Cincinnati right here, you have to understand this is the Union troops training headquarters. So not only are there hundreds, if not thousands of Union troops here, because there was a couple of them in garrison there as well, aside from just being the training grounds, these guys went right through Union headquarters, right? So whatever this was an important mission. You're not going through the enemy's headquarters and training grounds with thousands of troops in garrison or in training, unless it's important. So in that regard, if they're then raiding Masonic lodges and stealing shit along the way, which is what they're known to have done, they end up here in northern Ohio, right? This just happens to be in the immediate vicinity of where Thomas Jefferson found and he didn't go on a lot of mound hunts up here. He had a guy that did, though, a guy by the name of Albert Gallatin. He was the Secretary of State, I believe, for Jefferson. He had previously Washington hated him. Him and Washington got stranded in a couple cabins on mound adventures together and fucking hated each other. Apparently, Washington was not a fan of Al. I like to call him Al Gal, but Jefferson and his buddy Albert Gallatin had located a mound up here in this area, and this was actually the epicenter for Jefferson's prime meridian. So much like the prime meridian in the United Kingdom thing is based off of Jefferson. The reason why we don't do
Oh boy, we lost JJ.
Oh, my back.
Yes, you're back, sir. You are back.
I feel like I always break out here in my interwebs connection around 50 minutes in. I know this because I later insert a halftime into the show on the recorded version. And it's always around the same mark. I do it whenever the thing breaks. So whatever's going on here at the end of this Morgan's Raiders thing was already what I'm getting at was already previously an area that was important, right? A mound site that Jefferson wanted to make the prime meridian. That was the center point. So like the prime meridian's over in London, right? They have a point where all time is based off this one clock and everything else like that. All meridians are based off of that one point. Well, according to Jefferson, it was right here, up near where Morgan's Raiders ends this thing. So whatever's going on with Morgan's Raiders, I think is it's one of the tales I'd like to get into in the future with Headless Giant as well, because I feel like he's going to have some good input along some of these lines regarding what went on here with this infamous raid. But you understand what I'm saying? You would agree there, Nick, that if you're going into enemy territory, it's probably some important shit, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just going to say it makes me think of like the supposed story with Hitler. I mean, wasn't he raiding Masonic lodges too?
Exactly. And he was collecting old artifacts too, right?
And that's not sympathizing for the Masons, but I think there's been a few stories with them actually, supposedly, if the stories are true, them getting raided and stuff like stolen from.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think there's probably something to that, you know?
Yeah. I would assume if they're taking stuff from there, it probably has some occult significance.
And I think that's what it is. So, like, for example, some of the things that have been found in these mounds that I think are of occult significance that folks do want to see are things such as this. Stand by 1 second, please. This is the Cincinnati tablet. It was found, I believe, in 1832, circa 1832 at 5th and Mound Street in downtown Cincinnati, in about a 30-foot Adena mound. To me, they call this art, but this is clearly a language, and there is folks who have transcribed these things. So I think these are the things that were in mounds that were of the great interest to folks like the Society of Cincinnati.
It's interesting.
I would argue, folks, like, you know, again, we talk about a lot. There's a lot of things in American history that aren't talked about in the context of the Society of Cincinnati. Lewis and Clark, right, and their journeys across America. They were very. I mean, these are two members of the society. In my opinion, they have a lot of secret maps that never really got released of mounds. Right, they were on some secret mound missions. At the same time, on a parallel journey was a fellow by the name of Lieutenant Zebulon Pike. He's the reason why I know where all the mounds are in La Crosse, Wisconsin, because he was there in like 1804 or something like that, drawing maps At the same time, Lewis and Clark are heading out on a different journey west. He's heading on a further north journey than they are, and he's doing maps of different surveys of different mound sites. So I think there are part of the Lewis and Clark narrative is that you have another circumstance where you have Jefferson's guy and you got Washington's guy. So Clark was Washington's guy. Lewis was Jefferson's guy. So there are different factions even within factions within the society, I think.
Oh, I think that happens. For sure.
Sure. Yep, Pikes Peak, that's the same. That's Zebulon Pike. Pike's Place, Seattle, same Pikes. Relative of Civil War general, famously to all conspiracies, right? Albert Pike. Once again, you got Zebulon Pike. That's one hell of a name, right? It's very 19th century.
I was thinking about that before. I was like, yo, what kind of name is Zebulon?
The
sounds like something from Scientology.
Right. So you got Captain Pike from Star Trek. That might be a Pike reference, huh? To the same Pike family. But yeah, you got Albert Pike, right? He's, how many times do you hear Albert Pike but not they're definitely related. They're not directly, they're cousins. I forget the Mercy Choke. That's a good question. Is Zebulon related to Albert Pike? They are definitely of the same Pike family. The same Pike family that Pikesville, Kentucky is named after. Some of my ancestral roots there. The McCoy family is from Pikesville, Kentucky, is in Hatfields McCoys, as well as my cousin Charles Manson. His roots come from Pikeville, Kentucky. But yeah, and again, these name games are oftentimes depicting the mountain that's a mound area. For example, another Dina Mound area of Kentucky is Pulaski County. Pulaski, speaking of these Europeans that came over, Pulaski being one of them, Casimir Pulaski, I believe he was Polish and Czechoslovakian fella. There's a lot. So there's a lot of Pulaskis. He was an important figure, officer in the society, right? So there's a lot of Pulaskis, just like there's a lot of Pikes. Pikes Peak in Colorado is named after Zebulon Pike, right? And then you got, again, Pike's Place in Seattle. So you have a lot of things named after these folks. These are, again, I don't know about Pike's Place, but Pike's Market was a mound location. And again, these mounds kind of are different from area to area in different time periods they're built in. But the Adena mounds, which are the ones that I think the society is most interested in, the oldest ones, the ones that hold things like this tablet right here, or the giant skeletons, those are all Adena mound stuff, things that are found in Adena mounds. Also found in shell mounds, so of the same kind of styles of the Adena mounds, but they're constructed out instead of earthen materials because they're inland on the shorelines, even in New York City, New Jersey there, Nick, there was shell mounds. So
really?
They yeah, they were of the same era and similar construction to the Adena mounds, and held giant skeletons and possibly tablets. I'm not sure off the top of my head if any tablets were found in these shell mounds, but I know giant skeletons were. We covered them in that episode about one of the smiley face killer victims over there in Hoboken.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning the giant skeletons. I had never heard of that.
Pulaski, Tennessee. Oh, they found an 8-footer in that son of a bitch over there. I think it was called Madison Park too, right?
Really?
So Madison Park being after James Madison. Oh yeah, 7.5-footer or something like that. Pulaski, Tennessee, home to the KKK. Well, I don't know if it's home to the KKK. I thought that was there. You go, Pulaski, Tennessee. Guarantee there's mounds there. Guaranteed. Guarantee. Where was I going with any of this? Oh yeah.
Well, look at Lord. He put KKK. That would be 11, 11, 11. And you get 33.
Oh, interesting. So that's some magical stuff then.
Very good,
right?
Lord. Yes.
That's the is that the number of the magician?
I don't know, like I don't think it's
according to Crowley.
No, I don't know. The Freemasons, the reason they probably focus on it. I don't think I could really easily explain that.
Oh, that's fine. I knew it had some occult significance.
Oh no, occult significance, yeah, for sure. But I
Yeah.
myself probably don't really understand it fully. I just have
Sure.
these ideas and theories.
I can assure you I don't understand it.
Yeah.
So this is back to this. So the dispute, the Civil War of the Civil War, right, being the division of the Society of Cincinnati. Kind of gone over the shifting narratives, right? The shifting narratives and membership a little bit, the shifting narratives and their historical timeline. So accordingly, it says, like, even if you're to Google it and look at it, right? It says the Society organization. I just put Society of Cincinnati Civil War to see what the AI was going to tell me, right? During the Civil War, the Society of Cincinnati's triennial meeting in 1860 was held in Philadelphia, but the South Carolina delegation did not attend, it says, right? They also held one in 1863 in New York City, but neither South Carolina nor Maryland was represented. So we're talking about, the southern chapters, right? But not all the southern chapters. That's the new narrative. Now the old narrative was the entire southern chapters, right? Now the new one is only a couple of them. But then you look over on South Carolina's chapter's website, right? And then you look at here and it says the South Carolina Society of Cincinnati was the only active society in the South during the Civil War. Well, which is it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, because he just said that they weren't even represented.
Right. And they're on their own state chapter. So each of the 13 colonies, the original 13 states, they all have their own chapter. That was the South Carolina chapter's website. Within their own chapter's website, they're like, well, first of all, we were the only ones that were active, right? So there's obviously a dispute about who was active and who was not active. And then you have folks like South Carolina who are like, well, we were the only ones who were active. You see, it gets kind of silly, doesn't it?
Yeah. You get two different.
It's almost like a power move inside the society, right? Like, well, wait a second, we're not going to recognize the chapter out of South Carolina, and South Carolina is like, well, fuck you guys, we're the only ones that we should be recognized.
I've seen stuff kind of like that. Certain lineages, like for other orders, sometimes they'll deny. Some people will be like, claiming that they have the right to even represent that order. Sometimes you get some people saying that they don't get recognized. I mean, that even went on with the Astra Argentum. There's like certain people won't even recognize as legit because they don't think it actually goes back to somebody actually under Crowley.
That seems pretty rampant across these secret societies, right? Because like I've seen the list, like relative to the New Wabian Nation we spoke of, and the Grand Lodge of the New Wabian Nation, right? Like that's an quote unquote unofficial Masonic order.
Could be.
No, we discussed it in our remember the Tom Murray Dwight York conversation.
Oh yeah, unofficial. I definitely think there's Masonic ideas and values behind it.
But I'm saying as far as the other Masonic orders, they don't seem to recognize that Grand Lodge, right? They're saying that Grand Lodge is an independent. This goes on in Scientology too. They got regular Scientology, they got process church stuff, they got quote unquote independent versions of Scientology, right?
Yeah. Well, the last time I showed some of his, that's right. I totally had forgot that I came across
the Grand Lodge. Remember they had them. Even has that T-shirt.
Do you remember there was one advertisement that I showed that they were going to something that was acknowledged by the Masons? Remember we did see that? One of the orders, right. I think it was showing that they were going somewhere, and the rest of it, to me,
that's why I was doing the heavy quotation marks, right? Because they'll say at times that like they're on an official order, but then we found them officiating with one another.
Yeah. They're going to an event.
Yeah. That's what I mean. It's like what is official, what is not official. Like, are some people only maintaining that line, like the United Nations One China policy, right? Some people maintain that publicly, some people maintain that behind closed doors, type of deal, right? Like, so, like within the society, are they like, we're not recognizing South Carolina existed during the Civil War, but then like alternatively, like some of the other chapters, are like we got you, South Carolina, we still recognize you. You know what I mean? There does seem to be these kind of like weird. Interactions, right? These power dynamics. That's a great question, Marky Mark. Why do the Masonic baseball diamonds have a mound in the center? It goes back to, I think, the Society of Cincinnati and their veneration for mounds. we have America's national pastime, the sport of baseball, focused on a mound. And you even have teams like the Giants. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
And again, Abner Doubleday is, I realize there is an argument to be made he did not invent baseball, but he's often credited with the invention of baseball. And I think that's, again, speaks to his membership in the society. But yeah, there is some weird dynamics. Again, this shifting narrative, the who is and who is not a member, the what have yous of it, the situation, all very odd to me. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, is this because America's in a state of flux, right? When I was saying before, I'm not going to take credit for these things because I'm not, but since I have been talking about these things for the last 8 years, things have changed publicly again, as we've seen tonight, just a few examples of how these narratives have shifted to their public-facing narratives, their public-facing statements, etc. I think, again, given the power structure, the level of power associated with this organization, I think given the state of flux America's in, I think that I'm not saying we're at another juncture of another civil war, but I imagine that the state of a similar state to how the Civil War was as far as relative to society. So I think a lot of these things that are seen in the narrative shifting is it's a symptom of whatever the power struggles are in America, right? It's a symptom that I think was probably very similar to what was going on in the immediate onset of the Civil War. And again, I'm not willing to believe that Abraham Lincoln was not a hereditary member, despite whatever Wikipedia claims, the source of all information on the interwebs. That there was only a couple, hereditary members that were presidents. Because again, I think it's these points in time where these hereditary members that become president, that is a part of the turmoil, right? That is a part of the dispute. Like, we can't have this amount of power focused around this faction within the society, right? I really do think it boils down to that. That's why I think William Henry Harrison was likely a member, hereditary member, or member through his own service. And when he got elected president, they're like, that's it. We've had enough. And they off the dude, right? You can argue about why Lincoln was murdered. Dave McGowan presents some good arguments in that series from the Center for Reformed America on the things you don't know about everything you didn't know you knew about not everything you knew you didn't know, whatever that thing was titled. What was that Donald Rumsfeld quote? The known unknowns. We got the known unknowns and the known knowns of the Lincoln assassination. But yeah, McGowan points out a lot of the unknown knowns, whatever that is. I've gotten lost my own diatribe there. But yeah, the Lincoln situation, I think it's an example where shit gets the turmoil within the society gets so aggressive when a hereditary member becomes of the president. It may not be the only dispute. I just think it is, again, one of the disputes, right? And again, it's not like these folks have any problem, I don't think, with killing each other, right? You know what I mean? For example, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were friends for many years, hated each other for about 20 years towards the end of their lives, and reconciled their differences shortly before they died within an hour of each other on July 4th. Right? So again, I think there's that's like a hit, right? Like a mob hit, right? You're hitting them on a very specific day. Well, there's a weird amount of these founding fathers that have died on July 4th and or poisoned, as I assert with George Washington on July 4th, 1799. So I think there's something to be said, to some of those things, right? I believe James Madison also died on July 4th, not the same day as Jefferson and Adams. Where's the Fetzer Institute again? Is it in Cincinnati? I don't know what that is. I don't know what the Fetzer Institute is. Yeah, but I mean, at some point in time, I think a lot of these things, not just Abner Doubleday being a theosophical person, right? I just think a lot of this stuff, these disputes, while they may manifest in political fashions, Abraham Lincoln, for example, right? I do think there's some magical shit, some wizardry behind a lot of these things. Again, Doubleday's not the only one who's some sort of magical wizard in charge of the Theosophical Society, right? He's not an outlier, right?
That is interesting, Theosophical Society.
Right? Well, I mean, it's interesting. You have two prominent families that intermingled, the Gadsdens and the Draytons, and they intermingled with it out of South Carolina, and then they intermarried with the Astors out of the New York chapter, right? And they produced one of the founding members of the Process Church. This is interesting to me.
Yeah, that is interesting right there.
Speaks to the wizardry, right? Like there's an element, like there's this political element, there's the societal power element, military, industry, whatever you want to call it. There's representation across all of these things within the society. Then there's the magical wizardry, right? And that's the stuff that I think, even on top of identifying all of these incidents in American history or within conspiracy culture, that I say is not mentioned in the proper context relative to society, from the Captain William Morgan affair to the Civil War and the Lincoln assassination, whatever, to the Kennedy assassination, right? What have you? All of these things. Without that context, right? That's one element. I think there's another layer though beneath that, the context of the magical wizard shit, right? Lincoln's old lady brought in lots of mystics, witches, and magicians. See, there you go. And I'm pretty sure I watched a documentary about Lincoln being a vampire hunter. Did you ever see it? Obviously not a documentary, but did you ever see that movie?
I know what you're talking about. I don't know if I watched it, but I know what you're talking about.
I got super high one time, watched it, it was in a comedic fashion. I'm not sure if it was designed as a comedy, but I took it as a comedy, and it was pretty good. JJ Vance from Cincinnati, Ohio, old blood in the faction. I don't know what that means, but I like it.
I like Mark's comment. You see that? I believe JJ's headband is magical.
It's my wizard headband.
Speaking
of Abraham Lincoln and wizardry stuff, did you know that he knew Joseph Smith? Most probably knew Joseph Smith. His law partner was Joseph Smith's attorney in a case that Lincoln very likely attended. He was definitely in Springfield at the time. So it's very likely that they. Starting the. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back now.
On top of starting the Mormon stuff, of course, he, as you and I have discussed at least offline on numerous occasions, Nick, he died with a number of magical ornaments, right? Like some sort of Jupiter knife and Mars medallion.
Yes. Yeah, he had I think he had talismans on him.
Yeah, that's right. Talismans. There we go. I called them ornaments.
Trinkets,
yeah. He had like a Jupiter dagger and like a Mars talisman.
No, I think they're both talismans. Maybe you could be right on the dagger. I'm sure the dagger.
No, I think he definitely had a dagger, but he had multiple talismans as well.
Yeah.
Here we go. We got I got a picture of the dagger. Yeah, so he was definitely into wizard stuff. That's what I'm saying. Maybe him and Abraham Lincoln knew each other through wizard shit. I don't know these things. They were definitely in the same place at the same time, and Joseph Smith definitely hired Abraham Lincoln's law partner as his attorney. There's no doubt about that. There is questions whether or not the two men ever met. I can put them in the same place at the same time. Obviously, I wasn't there, but they were definitely in the same building at the same time, so they knew of one another at minimum. Oh yeah, what was that? I sent you a link to this. What was the Zucker? That's a good question there, Grateful Dogs. What was that Zuckerberg was wearing on Rogan? I sent you a link to that, didn't I, Nick?
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I saw a bunch of people
talking
about it. Yeah, I forgot where it goes back to. Yeah, but
Do
supposedly
you know what it was called?
no.
I'll look it up real quick.
Yeah. I saw it. I
You
was
got
like, oh.
something from Kabbalah.
Nah. Well, for some reason I'm thinking something Phoenician, maybe.
That's it right there. They're calling it a pagan pendant tablet of the moon god Khonsu. KHONSU.
Oh yeah, the concert. Yeah, I've got the concert.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, he's a moon god. I think, believe it or not, I think Crowley actually claimed he might have been him reincarnated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've coughed the concert or concert.
So what you're saying is Mark Zuckerbucks is a wizard. He does wizard stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's impressive. If he knew that god existed, that's kind of impressive. You don't hear too many people bring that dude up.
Sure, I've never heard of that god before.
He's
look it up.
Lunar god, a male deity. Yeah, a lot of people probably, there are actually gods that are male that are associated with the moon. You just don't hear about them too much.
Sure. No, I didn't know that at all. There was a male one associated with the moon. Abe was a homosexual, wasn't he? I mean, that's what folks say. Folks also say Jefferson and Madison were homosexuals. Now, I've asked that question on both of the tours of both of those men's estates. I got they don't like it when you ask that question. They don't like that. They don't like it when you're touring Thomas Jefferson's Monticello. I'm like, hey, anyone got any questions? Hey, was Thomas Jefferson and James Madison were they boyfriends? They're like, none of that. Like, get those questions out of here. I mean, I have heard those stories. To that I have no idea. James Madison would be my first cousin 5 times removed. My 4th great grandmother was his first cousin, Madison.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, that's what. All these families that are married, man. Amongst all, that's what I'm saying. Like, when you're talking about the Society of Cincinnati, you can say that there's different families, and there are different factions, but it's all one family, right? I mean, they're all so intertwined. It really boils down to like really one family. I think a lot of the I leave it open that Abraham Lincoln was into wizard stuff. Again, we had the good comment there from the folks at the interwebs. I forget who it was, but they said that Mary Todd Lincoln was into all sorts of wizardry and witchcraft stuff. I think that's probably true with Abraham. And when he's, that may be a connection of how he knew Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith was a very powerful man to know in Illinois at the time. He had a militia. The Mormon militia was larger than the state of Illinois' militia. So he was a very powerful dude. And again, he thought he was going to be U.S. president, and that is until someone shot him. Someone, probably Freemasons, that is. Or another society dispute. You know what I mean? You could look at it probably either way. Because again, back to did the enlisted hereditary members of the enlisted get incorporated? Well, yes, Smith died before the Civil War, but if this is a power struggle that they were trying to get incorporated into before the Civil War and maybe only succeeded afterwards, well, Smith's father served in the militia out of Massachusetts, so he served in the Revolutionary War. So perhaps Smith himself, somehow involved in some of those things. Nonetheless, he was known to put up the grand hailing sign of distress, right? Or the Masonic signs of distress, right? Yep.
There's some shit like that.
Before they found him dead with that dagger and his Mars talisman. So I'm saying,
the window too, right?
Yeah, in Carthage, Illinois. Yep. Yeah, I've been to that jail. I mean, it's like a little Mormon tourist stop now.
I'm sure.
Do
you think it's possible he really didn't die?
It's certainly possible. Yeah, it's certainly possible. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility whatsoever. I mean, especially back then. I mean, especially with fellow Masons, right? They're like, "Oh yeah, we shot that dude," but they're like, "Yeah, we just sent him west." He could have. Maybe he went out to Utah before Brigham Young even got there. You know what I mean? You don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, that wasn't part of America at the time, so he would have been escaping. He wasn't well liked in Missouri, I can tell you that much. I believe it was until the 1970s it was still technically legal to murder Mormons in the state of Missouri. One of those quote-unquote blue laws.
Wow. I know at one point, they had their own money, right? And their own gold.
Well, yeah, they had their own country. Yeah, they were not part of America for many, many years. It wasn't for, till the 1890s.
It was, I was reading some stuff on them, and I don't know if it was the Missouri. There's some of the banks up north, actually. One of their banks or something, like, basically took a tank, and I think it was because, like, they realized that they were skimping, like, their money wasn't equal what it's supposed to be. Instead of, like, an ounce, you're getting, like, 0.8. You know what I'm saying? It was some scam like that, and the money kind of, like, turned to shit, and a bunch of them left with that and ran down to Utah and actually purchased a lot of their property with that because the people didn't know that the money was no good yet. They got there faster than word of mouth, put it that way.
Yep. That's exactly what, oh Lord, my God, is there no help for the widow's son? That's exactly what Smith was quoted as saying. Did I lose you?
Mm-mm.
My back?
No, you're good. Yeah, you didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, and speaking of the Carthage, Illinois newspaper printed this quote and stated that Smith put up the grand hailing sign of distress. That was what the newspaper said the day after his murder there in Carthage, Illinois. That newspaper is available online. Well, Smith was known for fleecing folks there in Nauvoo, Illinois. So he was trying to get investors for his Nauvoo bank. He would have a few pieces of gold on top of like a blanket inside a chest, but the whole chest was like, rocks. You know what I mean? Filled with rocks, and just like the top layer was gold. So like he was known to do that like that. So like there was some, faking his death. He just got outed for polygamy, right? So polygamy for the Mormon folks, a lot of folks think that's for everybody. It wasn't. It was only for like the elite membership. So the mayor of Nauvoo was the commander of the Mormon militia, the army. He was the number 2 in charge behind Smith. He was the mayor of Nauvoo. Smith did not like that guy anymore. He threw him out, and then that dude spilled the beans and all the polygamy going on. So that's how this is often not described with the polygamy story, but yeah. So that's how it got outed. So and then shortly thereafter, the Smith bank scam got outed. So as far as him faking his death, that was a great time to do so because he had just been outed for the polygamy thing. He had a coup going on with his number 2 in charge of the militia was coming after him, right? He got thrown out of Nauvoo, but this dude was already, creating his own faction to take over, right? To get revenge. So there's a lot of reasons why Joseph Smith would have faked his own death, sure.
Yeah, his luck wasn't going too well.
No, it was a great time to clock out. And again, he thought he was going to be president. He sent a bunch of folks around the globe saying he's going to be president. So that obviously could have been another reason he might have pissed some folks off there too. Who knows? JJ, do you know anything about the Independence Moore Temple funding the Independence, Missouri? Oh, Independence, Missouri. Oh, yes, Independence. Yeah, I mean, there's still that's a good question there, Tara Jackson. There's still a heavy Mormon footprint there today. A lot of that property was owned, I think, by the reorganized Mormon Church, but since they've folded, the main mothership out of Salt Lake City, I think, has taken over most, if not all, of their property by this point in time, including the Kirtland, Ohio temple. So the reorganized Mormon Church, the RLDS, that was the faction that was Joseph Smith III, right? So you had Joseph Smith I, again, who served in the Revolutionary Army out of Massachusetts, got a land grant because of that in Vermont, right? That's where Joseph Smith was born, in Sharon, Vermont. Joseph Smith II, Jr. He's got a giant dick statue there in Sharon, Vermont, a big obelisk marking his birthplace. Joseph Smith III, though, when his father died, he is the one that started the RLDS. The faction, there was the main faction that went with Brigham Young. There was the second main faction that went with Joseph Smith III. Because then you had the Strangites, you had a number of other factions. They all, and a couple of these other factions, though, interestingly enough, I think it was the Strangites. They went up to Wisconsin. I wish Headless was joining us for this conversation. He would know specifically.
Say that a few more times. I hope he hears this episode.
Digging that in for him when he hears this later.
Yeah. I think it's funny. This is what's awesome is that he's going to see us both tomorrow.
That's true. Yeah, that's right. We're on tomorrow for Program to Kill. I'll have to.
I mean, it's he shows up, we
Give
can
him a
bust
couple jabs there.
Yeah. I'll be like, oh, I'm glad you made it today, sir.
Right. Yeah, because I think it was the Strang guys. They went to Wisconsin, and dude had his own epiphany. Right, this Strang was one of Joseph Smith's 12 apostles, part of his inner quorum of 12. He had his own, epiphany or visit from Moroni the angel, where he found his own golden plates in his own mound in Wisconsin. This faction of Mormonism still exists today. There's about 30 people that meet in one building in Wisconsin.
Really?
Yeah. You never heard of these folks?
It's got to be like, is that like a cult at this point?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like one family, I think, right? You know what I mean? But yeah, so like,
that's literally one. That could be 2 generations of Mormon family.
Right. It's not very, there's like, I want to say there's less than like 2 dozen or 3 dozen people still practicing. Let's see what their Wikipedia says. It says they got 6 congregations and 130. I've seen much lower numbers than that. But yeah, so this is the Strangites. This was again one of Joseph Smith's, inner 12 apostles, his inner quorum of folks. Burlington, Wisconsin. There we go. That's where they're headquartered out of, or Voree, Wisconsin, just outside of Burlington. Just north of Chicago, actually. But yeah, he after Smith was murdered in 1844 with no clear successor, he was one of the people that started his own faction. Right, Sidney Rigdon, that was another one of them, the Rigdonites. They went to Michigan, I believe. Sidney Rigdon's group. At its peak, the Strangite Church had about 12,000 members, making them noteworthy rivals to the larger faction led by Young. I think somebody from the Strangites wrote that sentence. They were not anytime noteworthy rivals. Joseph Smith III, his group right here, they were noteworthy rivals. The Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ. Again, they owned basically when Brigham Young left, everything the Smith family had owned, from the Hill Cumorah to Kirtland to Independence to Nauvoo, all that property stayed with the RLDS. In recent years, though, the main mothership out of Salt Lake City, the Brigham Young faction, has acquired a lot of that property, because even the RLDS is not doing. They're doing better than 130 members, according to what they're saying here. But yeah, they're not like the main mothership, that's for sure. But yeah, so the Strangites, they went to Wisconsin. He had his own Moroni visit. He had his own mound. He found his own golden plates, and he started his own version of Mormonism after.
Yo, wait, Moroni met him too?
Yeah.
Oh wow!
Apparently, he gets around, that Moroni.
Wow.
Yeah, let's see. Here we go. Yeah, they're called the Voree.
Like, he basically just redid Joseph Smith's story.
He copied the exact same tale of Joseph Smith and said, "You know what? I'm going to do it better, guys."
And it worked on 130 people. That's interesting.
I mean, that's what it's still at today, right? They said they were at 12,000 at one point. Here we go. This is it right here. James Strang's appointment letter in he had the Voree plates, right? But again, found in a mound. These are plates. These are plates saying Joseph Smith was all wrong. My wizard stuff is way better. That's what his plate said. But these are all like, so that I don't know for a fact what's that?
His magic was shit. Mine's legit.
Yeah, his magic ain't as good as mine. I don't know for a fact, but I presume folks like James Strang there would have used the map by folks like Zebulon Pike's maps in which to locate the mounds in and around that area of Wisconsin, because that area of Wisconsin is the area in which Zebulon Pike navigated through Chicago all the way up to La Crosse, Wisconsin, and then on through Minnesota and further west. But I'm just saying, like, these Society Cincinnati maps of these mounds, I think came important to other folks later in their mound madness. Because again, that's pre-Civil War stuff, right? With all the dispute amongst the Mormons.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But the Mormons played a big part. The Mormons played a big part in the Civil War, right? As far as financing it, as you were saying that we were saying they're out of the country, right? But like, they were very, California specifically was very, they sided with the Union, right? So like that was very big as far as where the Civil War ended. And again, California was started by Mormons. The Donner Party, for example. Familiar with that story? The cannibal story, the Mormon Party going into California, the Donner Party.
Oh.
Yeah, so I think a lot of that stuff is very interesting, and we've to kind of wrap up this conversation as far as the Civil War stuff goes, and recap on our previous discussions on this topic. I think you told me you found this paper as well, Nick, but a few months back I discovered this gem on the interwebs, and it's a scholarly paper out of Munich, Germany, on Society of Cincinnati.
Yeah, there's a lot of
familiar
stuff.
with this paper?
Yeah, I think that was the same one that I used for a little bit of the notes.
Nice. So it's entitled "The Deepest Piece of Cunning: Conspiracy Theory in the Society of Cincinnati, 1783 to 1790." It's 379 pages long. It's definitely a scholastic effort here in documenting exactly as it describes. Out of Germany, 2003. Exactly as it describes, it is based upon many conspiracy theories surrounding the Society of Cincinnati from every angle. I mean, look at so it's not just a history of the society. It's literally focused on conspiracy theory, which I think is fantastic. One of the chapters here, the first chapter, in fact, the theory of conspiracy, and you can see all the different aspects of that they're covering here relative to the society, and conspiracy. And then it continues on throughout as it states, the early years of the society from 1783 to 1790. You got the Philadelphia Mutiny, the founding of the society, the Newburgh Crisis. These are some topics I hope to explore more in the future, a future show, but I just want to kind of go over here. Stuff we've already talked about, really. If Headless was here, he would, I'm going to put another jab there. If Headless was here, he would immediately recognize some of these topics as well as stuff we've discussed. But it definitely goes into the French stuff in here as well. Here we go. Was it all true? The politics of the Society of Cincinnati, monarchy and nobility, rebellion and constitutional reform, Cincinnati politics under a federalist government. I mean, we've touched on all of these beforehand in previous discussions here. Then we got Between Two Revolutions, the Order of the Society and the Order of the Cincinnati in France, a French connection, a threat to republicanism or to a monarchy. I think, and the Jacobites, the Jacobins in Cincinnati. So that's a lot of that connection from like the Templars to the Society of Cincinnati, the in-between parties being the Jacobite era of those families. Same families, different eras of politics and, Western society here. But, I think it is interesting that somebody's gone into this great detail, and reading even like the introduction here is hilarious to me, because you get into the second paragraph and the author's already referencing Waco, Ruby Ridge, Timothy McVeigh, and the X-Files. You know what I mean? I was like, whoever wrote this, I was like, I got to meet this person, because this is a great way to frame the society and this conspiracy theory culture and how it relates to parapolitics, right?
This is actually definitely a different book. It wasn't the same one.
No,
the other one, believe it or not, was a little bit more of just like a historical book on the thing itself.
Yeah. I mean, this one definitely hits a lot of the history, but yeah, it definitely goes into it goes into the authors, how they discovered the Cincinnati, right? So next week, I said I got Dana from Rotting Jewels coming on to talk about the Society of Cincinnati relative to the early membership and current membership of the Process Church. And then the following week, I have a listener of Operation GCD joining me here to get a little GCD, talking about his discovery of the society. So he was investigating his genealogy and his family tree, and then he discovered the Society of Cincinnati, and then he started looking for podcasts about the society, and he discovered some of our conversations next. So he'll be coming on in a couple weeks, talk about some of those things. But that's kind of what this author did here in this paper, is they discussed their discovery of the society, and then discuss their discovery of how it relates to parapolitics and conspiracy theories. So I think this is a great paper. I'll post it in the links. I have not read the entire thing. I'm not saying I agree with the conclusions in the paper. I just like the way they framed the conversation. For example, here it says, just, starting out, He says, I spent my early graduate studies learning about the ratification of the Constitution and wrote my master's thesis on the complex and rich debates in the state of Connecticut. At the same time, I became aware of a tradition of radical political dissent in modern America, an abundance of conspiracy theories that also extended into popular culture. It was the time of Timothy McVeigh and the militia movement of Waco, Ruby Ridge, Pat Robertson, and the X-Files. Suddenly, conspiratorial explanations for current and historical events seemed everywhere. I think that's just a great way to frame it. That's the way I look at it, right? Again, I want to meet this person because that's the same way that I think this should be framed. It's the way like I've kind of always tried to frame it relative to parapolitics. And the person's spot on here with their analysis as well, as they write here. I realized that conspiracy theories occurred in episodic waves throughout American history. And from Bernard Balin, I'm not sure who that is, and Gordon Wood, I've heard of him. These are authors of American history, I believe. I learned that the founding fathers believed in a secret English plot against American liberty. And again, if there's been any takeaway of any discussion I've had relative to Society of Cincinnati, is this internal struggle between factions within the society, the liberty side versus the anti-liberty side. One example being, I think Alexander Hamilton represented the liberty side, Aaron Burr representing the European interests that he was funded by in the anti-liberty side. One example. So that's not the same one you came across, huh?
No, completely different book.
Interesting.
Yeah, if I could try to find the other one, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, you might have. I'll have to go back and look. You might have actually sent it to me before. I'll close on this last statement regarding because this will go into next week's conversation on some of these similar topics. This will be my last point here, Nick. I'll turn it over to you for any statements, closing statements you'd like to share with me or the folks of the interwebs. But on this list of membership here, you'll see Senator Chauncey Depew as a hereditary member of the Society of Cincinnati. He's the founder of the Pilgrim Society. You familiar with the Pilgrim Society?
Yes. Yeah, I had Ramsey on.
I was about to say, didn't you just have William Ramsey talking about that stuff?
I think William Ramsey and I think Headless might have been there for that.
See, I thought so. I thought you guys covered that.
Yeah. Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So if any folks want to learn about the Pilgrim Society, tune into the Occult Rejects there with William Ramsey. Nick interviewed him there. It was what about a month ago, maybe?
Oh, it was probably more than that, but it probably dropped then. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
So what I'm sure, no offense to your all's discussion, as I did listen to it, I recall her being very informative. I didn't learn until after I started looking into the Pilgrim Society after your all's show, and that's when I learned this fun fact. So, more talks. As I was saying before, within conspiracy culture, and I'm guilty of these things as well. I'm not pointing any fingers at William Ramsey. I like Bill's research and his podcast there. And again, I enjoyed your all's conversation on the Pilgrim Society. Very informative. Highly recommend that to learn more about it. But again, within conspiracy culture, we often talk about these subjects and we don't have the context of that it's related to the Society of Cincinnati, right? Like within your all's discussion, again, great conversation, lots of information. The context that was missing, no fault to you or Bill, obviously. Again, I learned it after I listened to y'all talk about it. I didn't know much about the Pilgrim Society previous to that. What I learned, though, was that it was connected to the Society of Cincinnati. Again, much like I would claim every other American conspiracy goes back to the Society of Cincinnati, and that every day within conspiracy culture, from the Tales of William Morgan to the Pilgrim Society, we forget to include the proper context of the Society of Cincinnati.
That's wild.
Pretty wild, huh?
Yeah.
Well, Nick, I appreciate your time as always, bud, and your input and thoughts on these things. What do you think about some of my thoughts there, bro? Before you have some closing thoughts, I got one question for you. And leading into that here, what do you think about this idea of the secret wizard war? So you have like the political, societal factions, right? Then you got like a wizard war going on here amongst the society, right?
Yeah, I do think that stuff happens within secret societies. I mean, it could even be maybe some people don't like the way the organization's running, and you just get like difference of
Right.
opinion and stuff.
Well, Crowley was famous for that, right? Didn't he have a famous feud amongst some of his, wizardry feuds?
Oh yeah. I mean, he was also an opinionated person. So, but no, I definitely think that happens, and I'm sure we've probably seen stuff and seen that go on and told something else, you know, or thought it was something different. But I definitely, I would not put that past being like, possibilities of situations.
Nice.
Yeah, no, that's just my opinion because, like, I just from opinions that from certain things I've even seen within the OTO, not that any lodge is really defected, but you could see some people were not okay with a lot of changes that kind of went on,
Sure.
and you'd either see them
Sure.
leave or I could see, like, if given a chance, if somebody with a different opinion was able to, like, kind of get into the position to control the lodge, they might kind of undo certain things that they're allowed to do. I have even seen people like almost plan that, believe it or not. Like there was
Sure.
somebody who I was friends with that was like trying to move up or get along with, like, kind of like with that whole, like, where you start having all those roles. For some reason I can't think of the proper name for it. But secretary or this or that, treasurer.
Sure.
And his
Sorcerer.
yeah, he really didn't agree with a lot of the weird stuff. Bending to the weird shit. And if he was in the position to it, I think he says he was going to try to, like, actually change the lodge if he got into the right
Yeah, I feel like that's very common because of the egotistical nature of this wizardry activity. I mean, with the Mormons, you got what? You got when Joseph Smith died, you got number 3, you got Joseph Smith 3, you got Brigham Young, you got Sidney Rigdon, you got James Strang. So you have 4 main factions right there, right? That's not even talking about the later factions when you got the Romneys, you got the LeBarons, you got the Jeffs, right? These polygamous cult factions that later split off, right? I just think Scientology, you got the Process, and you got independent folks, you got Nexium, who I would argue is really the Albany chapter of the Process, but they were nonetheless an offshoot of Scientology, doing the same squirrel activities as Scientology would say, using Scientology. That's what they call it, squirreling, using Scientology practices outside the realm of L. Ron Hubbard's expertise. That is, meaning their pocket
themselves.
Yeah, that's what they call it, squirreling. Yeah, they're squirrels. So if you use L. Ron Hubbard's tactics outside of the official confines of an L. Ron Hubbard building, you're in trouble. You're a squirrel. That's the way they look at it. Yeah, that's a good comment there, A to Z, about Cincinnatus. That is the legend. So Cincinnatus was a farmer in the Roman Republic, called to duty twice as a military dictator to fight off foreign imposing faction or wars into the Roman Republic, and then is famously known for giving the power back to the people. George Washington essentially alludes to himself as doing this in his final speech to Congress on Christmas Eve, 1798, I think it was, about giving power back to the people. I think, as a farmer himself, who came back and took over as president 8 years after the war ended, or 7 years after the war ended, 6.5. He viewed himself as Cincinnatus, right? I think he very much viewed himself as if not the reincarnation, but at least embodied the nature of Cincinnatus, right? On that same note, Steve Bannon. To the best of my knowledge, not a member of the society, but I can't rule it out. Definitely not a paternal member. His Irish heritage came after the war to America. But Steve Bannon has been going around calling Donald Trump Cincinnatus for the past year. So I think this is again. Oh yeah. Let me pull up. I'll pull up a clip real quick. Hold on. Stand by 1 second, please, and I'll pull up that clip.
Wild.
Right. But he points out when he's talking about that, he talks about Trump's intention to give the power back to the people, like Cincinnatus. And he's been doing it since this time last year.
That is interesting.
Right, isn't it? I'm trying to find it on my timeline. Give me 1 second here. You got any other closing thoughts for us here, Nick, on the power struggles of society of Cincinnati or any of the other things we discussed here this evening?
I do think it's interesting how I do think there's word games going on with who's actually either like a member or an honorary member or kind of got, whatever, because of parents or whatever, great grandparents, hereditary.
Sure.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that seemed like there was some silliness going on there.
Some games being played.
Yeah. Besides that, no, nothing really. I mean, I guess I could plug tomorrow's live. Tomorrow,
let's do that.
Me and JJ and a few other people will be going live tomorrow for Program to Kill.
Our second attempt at Program to Kill, right?
Yes. Oh yeah,
Are we picking up where we left off? Are we redoing that show that got taken down?
No. That believe it or not, I did not unedit it, and it's just not getting dropped on YouTube, unfortunately.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to edit my stuff for that crap. So no, but I'm assuming as long as the only time I ever get in trouble is when we talk about the same issue. I would assume tomorrow when we're talking about Program to Kill, we won't be up to that timeline yet to where that was even in existence. So there's no reason to bring it up.
Right. Yeah.
I know kind of last time it kind of came up by a fluke. But,
right. Yeah, we'll have to try to avoid that. No, it was a good conversation last time. I definitely looking forward to some continuing on. I enjoy the Program to Kill stuff. Obviously, I interjected my Edward Wayne Edwards propaganda into the conversation last time because that was an individual Dave McGowan didn't know about. No one knew about at the time that he wrote Program to Kill. However, he's a guy that almost embodies that the whole character basis and outline that the McGowan paints as far as this mind control, serial killer, cult, satanic aspect. I mean, that is Edward Wayne Edwards. You know what I mean? He's right there in the epicenter of all that activity. And again, somebody who infiltrated the Atlanta Child Killing Task Force. So, this is a guy who wasn't even a cop. He got a cop uniform, infiltrated a task force, pretended to be a cop, and murders he likely participated in. So yeah, definitely some good stuff. I like to insert all that stuff in the Program to Kill conversations because it seems pretty relevant. But yeah, looking forward to that one for sure. That's tomorrow night, huh?
Yes, tomorrow night at 9:00. It'll be me, you, Headless, Lisa, Teresa, Mike, Thrash, and Julia. If everybody shows up, yeah, it'll be a party. Talking about Program.
I'm into it, and I agree, Tara Jackson. Edward Wayne Edwards is a very interesting character. I'm gonna have to break some of that down in the future. For example, the time he went on the show To Tell the Truth, which was a game show in the 70s, and he convinced folks that he wasn't a homicidal serial killer. Yeah. So yeah, and then before I show, let me just show this real quick clip here about Cincinnati and Donald Trump here real fast, and then we'll close this on out.
Yeah, I was
to take his entire company and liquidate it. What he and his family have worked, I don't know, for 100 years for. You know what his sin was? That he ran for president of the United States to thwart the globalist Hillary Clinton and her apparatus. Merrick Garland, I remember he was going to be if she had won, he was going to be in the Supreme Court for life, a lifetime appointment. That's Donald Trump's great sin. And the greater sin was after they stole the second term was to return, like Cincinnati's, from the plow.
See?
He had no incentive to return, none, except no manifestation in the material world, except to save
the republic is what he's saying. It ends there. But yeah, I think it's interesting because, allegedly Donald Trump's a member of the society already, right? From his first term.
I'm surprised they came out. That's interesting they came out and said that.
There's 3 or 4 of those clips. That's just one of them. Yeah, I mean, I don't know when that one was, but the first one I found was last November. There was one in February, one in March, and I think one in May, like right before Bannon reported the jail in the spring, early summer. There's four occurrences in the last year, at least, that he's called him Cincinnati. just to, again, to the relative nature of this secret society that started America in nearly 250 years ago, and is still very relevant here today as we're coming near the 250-year anniversary of America here next year. But yeah, folks, the interwebs, I appreciate everyone's time. And Friday night, we got Fridays with the Occult Rejects and Operation GCD. Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Times with Brad from the White Rabbit, I believe, this week.
Yes, Bradley from White Rabbit. Yes, should be fun.
Just a general conspiracy theory conversation roundtable, whatever we get into, I guess, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm sure it'll be interesting. He's a funny dude.
Well,
too.
On that note, folks, the interwebs, thanks for joining us to get a little GCD. Nick, thanks for joining us to get a little GCD, bud.
Of course, thank you. Of course.
Well, that's it. That's the show here, folks. So the next time you're out on the town, visiting your local watering holes, or perhaps just meandering around, and you hear the unmistakable sounds of metal clanking, and you spot signs of a disturbance, then check your six. Look in that garbage can, because you never can tell. The GCDs may be loose in your town.